This is my friend Sean Hopwood. He is a famous author. He is a scholar, but he began the change of his life when he was inside of a prison cell, and that's why I'm so grateful for him taking time out of his busy schedule to talk with us today. Sean, welcome to the program. Tell us again a little bit more about your background. Let us know how you got into the criminal justice system.
Well, thanks for having me, Michael. I got into the criminal justice system like most people do. I committed a bunch of crimes. I was in my early 20s and robbed 5 banks with guns. And fortunately for me, no one got hurt through my stupidity. And then I found myself at the age of 22 with a 12-year, 3-month sentence in federal prison.
12 years and 3 months. And that's a stiff sentence, not as stiff as many of our friends have gotten for that type of a crime. What do you attribute the reason that you were able to get away with 12-year sentence on 5 armed bank robberies?
A few things. One was, I think this was probably the most important, was that my defense attorney and my prosecutor went to law school together. I'd love to be able to tell you that it was something else, but as many people find out going through the system, a lot of the difference between people with really long sentences and much shorter sentences are a good defense lawyer, a reasonable prosecutor, and luck. And I was able to have all 3, and that's the reason why I only had a 12-year sentence instead of some of these other guys are getting, like 20 or 30 or life.
Well, the nice thing about it, Sean, is it wasn't only a benefit for you to get that 12 years, but it was a benefit for every other person in federal prison and state prison for that matter, because you've become an extraordinary advocate for people in prison. And our listeners who don't know you will be knowing the reason why as we get through this. Why don't we start by talking a little bit about what your mindset and adjustment was like when you started inside of the prison system?
Well, I was young. So, when I first got to prison, I wasn't thinking about the future. I was just living like I was on the streets day to day, had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, had no idea the purpose for my life, and had no idea if I did come up with some sort of goals, how to actually achieve those. And it wasn't until I kind of switched jobs from working in the prison kitchen to the prison law library that things started to happen, kind of by accident first. I got a job in the prison law library handing out books, but I didn't want to pick those books up and read them because they were big and thick and intimidating, and I really didn't have much interest in law. So
what kind of education did you have before you went to prison?
I had gone to college for a couple of months until I was kicked out when I was 19 because I didn't go to class. So I didn't even have an undergrad education.
Were you a good student in high school?
No, horrible student. Your classic, just do enough to get past. I was a C student throughout high school, and when I went to college, I wasn't a great student either because I just didn't apply myself.
So that changed when you were in the prison system at some point. Tell us a little bit about how long you were in before you started thinking about your future.
Well, it was June 26th of 2000. It was a pretty important day for me. It was the day that the United States Supreme Court handed down this decision called Apprendi v. New Jersey. I, along with every other federal prisoner in the country, thought that this decision was going to apply to the guidelines, and all of a sudden I had a lot of motivation to try and learn the law because I realized I didn't like prison and I wanted to get a sentence reduction. So I started the process of researching these legal puzzles and trying to write out the answer. And it didn't work out for me very well because I was never able to get any time off for myself, but I found I enjoyed that process. So I started helping other guys next to me, first writing memos for their lawyers on direct appeal. And eventually I wrote a habeas petition or 2 for other prisoners.
Mm-hmm. And then there came a time when you did some legal work that resulted in national attention coming to your life and really setting your life on a trajectory of extraordinary success and achievement. Tell us a little bit about that deal, that operation.
Well, so I was in a prison in Illinois, federal prison in Illinois, even though I was from Nebraska. Nebraska doesn't have a federal prison. But there were some guys there at my prison from Nebraska, and one was this guy named John Fellers, who was in my housing unit. And John also had a 12-year sentence for conspiracy to distribute methamphetamine. And he came up to me one day and said, "Sean, I just lost my appeal in the 8th Circuit. My lawyer says, it's not worth filing to the U.S. Supreme Court because I have no chance. Will you help me?" And I was very hesitant because I didn't know a lot about the law, and I knew filing a brief to the U.S. Supreme Court was different. But John persuaded me, and I spent 2 months working on this petition, and we sent it off, and I largely forgot about John Fellers and his case. John transferred to another prison. It was about a year after he transferred that I was walking one day on to the recreation yard at 6:30 in the morning when a buddy of mine came running and screaming my name. And, this being federal prison, I thought, what did I say to this dude yesterday? He wants to come fight me at 6:30 in the morning. But you don't normally go to a fight carrying a newspaper in your hand. And what he had was a copy of the USA Today, and it said that they had granted John Fellers' case, they being the 9 justices of the United States Supreme Court, and how unlikely that was given John had filed pro se without a lawyer. And the article actually quoted from the brief that I had pepped out on a typewriter.
And so it mentioned you, even in the USA Today article, that it mentioned you as a person in prison was successful in getting one of your fellow prisoners a hearing before the Supreme Court.
Yeah, so that happened not once, but the second time, a few years later, I was able to get another person's petition heard by the Supreme Court. And, before I left prison, I had won cases kind of in federal courts all across the country, both in federal circuit courts and federal district courts.
Well, when you won the case for Mr. Fellers, or rather got him to the point of the Supreme Court, it's my understanding that you had a series of other small achievements that really started to fall into place, like mentors coming into your life, people wanting to get to know just how Sean Hopwood thinks. And tell us a little bit about some of those mentors who chose to invest their time and their energy in you.
Yeah, well, it was twofold. It was mentorship and then the process of setting goals. So on the mentorship side, I was really fortunate in that the attorney that took over John Fellers' case, the name is Seth Waxman. He's a former United States Solicitor General, which means he's the lawyer that argues on behalf of the federal government in every case before the U.S. Supreme Court. He was in private practice by this time as the head of the Supreme Court and appellate practice at a big, huge law firm with offices all over the world. And, he bills over $1,000 an hour. And I think most people in his position would have said, "Hey, Mr. Jailhouse Lawyer, great job getting the cert petition granted, but we'll take it from here." And that's the exact opposite of what Seth did. Seth.
But first of all, how did Seth even hear about the case? Did you reach out to him, or how did he get involved in the case?
John Fellers called him. Turns out that when your case gets granted by the Supreme Court, you become very popular. So John had lawyer after lawyer calling his federal prison up in Minnesota trying to offer their services to take the case. But John didn't know who to choose, but John was smart enough to know that it's not always the lawyers that are calling that you want. It may be the lawyers that aren't calling, that don't have to call and try and beg for a Supreme Court case that might be the type of lawyer you really want. So he called Seth Waxman and told Seth that this petition had been granted. And Seth said, "Well, I read the petition. It's really good. You did a really good job." And John said, "Well, that wasn't me. That's a friend of mine, Sean Hopwood, who's in another prison. He was kind of my jailhouse lawyer." And Seth said, "Well, do you think we could keep him involved with the case?" And John said, "Well, I would hope we could." And so Seth said, "Yes, I'll take the case as long as we get Sean on the team." And that was a huge break for me, almost as much as the court picking the case to begin with.
So you're in federal prison, serving a 12-year sentence for armed bank robbery. You succeed in getting one of your fellow prisoners to the Supreme Court, but then one of the most esteemed lawyers in the United States wants to collaborate with you and wants to understand how you're working. And that starts building a relationship for you. And what I really love about that incremental step of progress is that you had no idea this was going to happen when you went into that prison system. And yet the hard work that you did inside, the seeds that you sowed, really opened opportunities for you. And I hope that some of our other friends in prison can get inspired by that and realize that regardless of where they are right now, they can have a great outcome if they apply themselves as you did. It took you a little while to get to that stage. How long was it before you actually from the time you walked in to the time that you filed the brief in the Fellers case? How long had passed?
That was like 2 years in. I don't think the case was granted till the third year in. And we ended up winning John Feller's case 9-0 in the Supreme Court. And that was like the fourth year in. And that was a big year, not only because we won John Feller's case, but because that was when Seth kind of put the seed in my head that, hey, maybe I could have this law thing as a career. It had never dawned on me that I could get out and actually continue writing briefs to help people. And I didn't know how that would look like, if it would be a paralegal working for a law firm, or if I didn't even dream big enough to think that I could go to law school. But Seth kind of put that thought in my head. And so I set a series of really small steps of what I needed to do kind of from there on in year 4, knowing I had about 6 years left. And what did I need to do to make sure that when I got out, I was going to have success? And for me, it was a couple of things. One was to continue to learn the law, but 2 was just knowing the law was not going to be enough. I, like everyone else, have to have the formal education. So I started taking college classes, both from the prison and through correspondence. And that really helped me grow both as a person and just with the process of planning something long down the road in the future and then trying to meet that goal. I was not that type of person when I went into prison. If it wasn't a goal I could meet in about 2 days, it wasn't a goal worth having, because who likes to work a long time for something years from now?
Well, it certainly paid off in your case.
Yeah.
Yeah, it paid off in your case. And so that process then of setting small incremental goals got you through the next 6 years. And you represent, not only did you get you through the next 6 years, but you learned a lot. You led a life of meaning and contribution. And you were an ally to many people in prison because you got a lot of people out and helped change the law for many people in prison. Tell us what it was like coming back to society after being locked up for 10 years, but coming back to society during, one of the greatest recessions, certainly the greatest recession of our lifetime.
Yeah. So I was released to the federal halfway house in October of 2008. So it was the height of the recession. No one was finding work, let alone the guy that just did almost a little over 10 years in federal prison. And what I found was, A, there weren't a lot of jobs. B, the jobs there were, I was not qualified for. And C, the things that I was uniquely qualified for, like knowledge of the U.S. Supreme Court, that's just not a necessary job skill in Omaha, Nebraska, because even the firms there don't regularly practice before the U.S. Supreme Court. And the firms there don't generally do the type of law that I did. So I had a hard time finding work, but through a stroke of luck, again, found a place that had an advertisement for a document analyst for work in the U.S. Supreme Court in downtown Omaha. And it turned out that was a brief printer that helped lawyers file briefs all over the country to the U.S. Supreme Court. And it just so happens all of their work is in Washington, D.C., but their home office is in downtown Omaha. And they
You said that you went to college while you were in prison. Were you able to finish your undergraduate college degree while you were in prison?
I was not. I tried to take as many general education credits as I could from as many different places so that when I got out, it would not take a long number of years for me to finish my undergrad. And I think I finished my undergrad in about 2.5 years after I was released.
So you got out in 2008, had a hard time finding a job. Did you go back to school then before you found this job with the
No,
legal
I
firm?
Yeah, I got the job and then I went back to school. I was released from custody in April of 2009. I guess it was under 2 years because by the July of 2011, I finished my undergrad degree. I found a school that would take all those credits from all those universities and let me get an undergrad degree in pre-law. And it took me a little less than 2 years from the day I was released to finish that, or a little over
How
2.
old were you at that time, Sean?
I would have been about 34, 35 when
So
I
you're at
finished.
34, 35, 10 years of prison behind you, felony conviction for armed bank robbery, finds your way into school, finds your way into a good job, and then tell us what happens.
Well, a couple of things. The big one was one of my clients I helped through my work at the brief printer, who was a law professor from the University of Michigan, told my story to the New York Times. And the guy that covers the Supreme Court for the New York Times, Adam Liptak, wrote a story in the February of 2010 in the New York Times about the things I had done both in prison and where I was working now. And that was a life changer. We had people calling about movie deals and TV deals and book deals. And 3 weeks later, my wife and I were flown out to give a speech at Harvard University with Seth Waxman and TV interviews. And it was overwhelming. But the best thing that turned out of that article was that when I applied to law schools, people knew who I was. And so I did. I took the LSAT and I applied to law schools, and a lot of them said no, but a few said yes. And one of those was the University of Washington School of Law in Seattle. And I got into school and applied for this Big Gates Public Service Scholarship and was really blessed to receive that because that paid for school.
So while you're going through prison for armed bank robbery, how many times did you hear that a felon cannot practice law and can never be a lawyer?
Oh, countless times, but not near as many times as I heard it once I got out from actual lawyers. Probably the worst legal advice I've ever received was from lawyers on whether or not I could become a lawyer, which, kind of tells them how well they know the rules. People, very few people thought that I would get to go to law school, let alone actually get my law license one day. And I was worried about it. I was worried while I was in law school, like, am I going to be able to use what I know to help people someday? Because if they don't give me a law license, I can't do litigation. And it was very obvious to me and everyone around me that that's where my strengths lie. And so I was worried about that. But May of 2015, they gave me my law license and I became a lawyer that day.
Well, they didn't give you your law license. You earned it, and you sowed a lot of seeds to get there. And that's what's really important for, I think, people to understand, because when people hear extraordinary success stories like yours, Sean, sometimes when you're living in struggle, you have a tendency to say, well, he's lucky. That could never happen to me. But there was a time in your life when maybe people would have said it could never happen to Sean Hopwood. But it was just that continuous effort of sowing seeds, nurturing those seeds, celebrating small achievements along the way. And then doors started to open for you. People started to believe in you. People started to want to be a part of your life. And it began when Seth Waxman takes a case and says, well, maybe we can make Sean Hopwood part of the team. And then it goes on with you helping other people in prison, and then getting out and having a professor from Michigan saying, I want to help him. And then having a Liptak write an article about you, and then having the Gates Foundation issue you a scholarship. All of this is a culmination of many small steps that really began while you were locked inside of a federal prison a federal prison serving a sentence for armed bank robbery. And yet you just have continuously are pursuing higher mountains and new goals. Getting out of law school was one thing. As you said, you said that they gave you a law license. I would submit that you earned it through the extraordinary efforts that you applied. But that wasn't the end of your journey. Tell us about your first job as a lawyer.
Well, I think almost every one of my successes in life has just happened like you described, which was you make a lot of sacrifices on the front end. you don't really know what's going to be at the end of the rainbow, so to speak. You make a lot of sacrifices, and it's not always fun, and you work really hard, and you build community with people. People see that you're working hard. They see that you're a changed person. They want to get on board with it. And then you keep doing that long enough. And eventually, when you apply for these things that I apply for, like going to law school and various other things that have happened to me, they happen kind of organically, is how people would view it from the outside, but they don't see that that was a seed planted 5 years ago with someone. An email I sent to someone 5 years ago where I introduced myself and kind of told a little bit about myself and became friends with someone through email. Turns out that friend 5 years later is one of the reasons why I get a job at the Georgetown Appellate Clinic, which was my second job.
But what was your first job? You're out of law school. Tell us the first job that a newly minted lawyer with an armed bank robbery. Where are you working?
Well, where else would I want to go but go work for a United States federal judge to see how the law is made? So I got a clerkship with the Honorable Janice Rogers Brown of the Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, which is widely considered to be the second most important court in the country. And that was a big deal, too. 2 days after Judge Brown says yes to me, it's in the New York Times. That's how big a deal that was. It was not the norm for federal judges to be hiring former federal felons. And so that was my first job. And that was a strange job, Michael, in so many ways, not the least of which there would be a few times every week where I would walk into the courthouse and hear a marshal with a handful of chains and shackles and handcuffs, and I would be directed right back to prison, thinking that it's me he's coming to cuff, and here I am standing in the middle of the courthouse with a suit on, with the little badge that gets me in all the locked doors. So that was a pretty surreal experience.
And then after clerking for the second highest court in the United States, which basically makes it one of the second highest court in the world, you then get another really distinguished job. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I knew that I wanted, when I got out, when I was finished clerking, that I wanted to be in a job where I could litigate cases on, the types of cases that I litigated when I was in prison for a bunch of indigent prisoners, people filing habeas petitions, and have the opportunity to work on some civil cases as well, which is an area of law that I haven't spent a lot of time working on. And I found that one place kind of met everything I was looking for, and it was the appellate clinic at Georgetown Law School. Not only because I get to litigate cases, but because I would work with really good people and have a whole bunch of young and really talented and energetic law school students helping me litigate cases for prisoners. And it's been the best job I've ever had in my life, working here at Georgetown and being able to do that.
And how long was that position at Georgetown? How long did that last?
Well, it's ongoing because I will be here through part of the summer until I start my new job.
And tell us a little bit about your new job.
Well, nothing is official or public yet, is the line I keep using. But I've been offered and will be accepting a job to be a tenure track full-time law professor at Georgetown, which means that, I'm going to be teaching criminal procedure to 105 first-year law school students, probably starting in the fall. 105 students, Michael, at once. That's a little scary. Almost as scary as going out on the yard the first time, but not different type of scary.
But you've prepared yourself well. You've sown a lot of seeds. You've learned an awful lot, and now you're a completely, different person than anybody would expect. And I think that anybody who's watching this show in a federal prison should see the hope of what they too can become. And if they'd like to read more details about it, I know that you are a prolific writer, and you can show them your book. There it is. Tell us a little bit about that book.
Lawman. Nobody ever understood why the title Lawman.
And what's the subtitle?
Until they remember, I say, that's what all the guys in the joint used to call me. There goes my lawman. The title is My Story of Robbing Banks, Winning Supreme Court Cases, and Finding Redemption, which is a mouthful, which is why I can confidently tell you that I had no choice over the subtitle, Random House. I'm blaming that on them.
I think it's a great subtitle, and I think it's a fabulous story. And I can tell you that one of the highlights of my journey in prison was when I heard from your editor and gave me an opportunity to read the manuscript before it was published. And it's just such an extraordinary story that everybody inside should have an opportunity to read and learn from the Sean Hopwood story and his new book that's coming out, which is about hustlers, people who make things happen out of nothing.
That's right. That's right. I've got a mentor that's a hustler. A business hustler. That would be
Well, Sean, it was really a pleasure for me to have you on our program. This is the 19th day or the 18th day of a course that people have been going through in federal prisons and state prisons and schools, where I'm trying to show people that the decisions that we make every single day are what puts us in a position for success later down the road. And there is no better evidence of that story than listening and learning from you. So I'm just so thankful for you and your family for giving me the time to spend time with us.
That's the interesting thing. Everyone can do it. I'm mentoring 16 people that have serious felonies that are either in law school or on their way to law school or just finished with law school. So it's not just me. Everyone has the ability to change things around and, kind of rise out of the ashes as someone different.
We recently had the Arthur Duncan on the show a couple of weeks ago, who was another former federal prisoner, and then became a city attorney, and now he's in private practice, getting ready to start practicing federal law as well.
Yeah, there are a lot of us out there. We're the most ethical of the lawyers, ironically.
Well, we're certainly grateful to have you as a leader and as somebody we can look to. That's why I consider you a mastermind on our program. You have certainly overcome and achieved a high level of success, and you're going to inspire everybody who has the opportunity to listen and learn from you. And I really strongly recommend that you get a copy of Lawman so that you can read more about Sean's inspiring story.